Hi, this is Chris McQuirt. I haven't been on here for a while. Of course, this is one of my favorite couple weeks of the year where March Madness is happening and I've got basketball to watch, but also my dealing with the puppies. They're doing pretty good. Today, I'm going to be doing an audio chapter one for Intervention Book One of the Adamic Chronicles. I want to find out how long it's going to take me because on Thursday I'm going to be at Hyde Brothers Books and I will be reading chapter one. So bear with me and you get to hear me read chapter one of my own book. So here we go. Chapter one, the interview. Most of you would agree that interviews are doorways to a new future. At least that's the case if you secure the job anyway. This becomes doubly true when the job involves working with aliens on black projects, which eventually lead to saving the world. So let me begin by introducing myself. I'm John Thomas, a late 50-ish RF engineering candidate embarking on what is likely my final stop along the Gypsy Engineering Highway. The clock displayed 8:35 a.m., and the Las Vegas morning sun had already painted the Frenchman Mountains with a beautiful palette of orange and pink hues. As a Midwesterner, this was akin to lunchtime, and I had been awake since around 3 a.m. The name Frenchman Mountains had a mysterious ring reminiscent of the Lost Dutchman mind and Superstition Mountains. Deserts always seem to carry an air of mystery, with their scorching heat and barren landscapes inhabited by creatures most people prefer to avoid. The night in the desert was filled with ghastly tales of with tumbleweeds rolling through the darkness and dunes forming mysteriously. The early morning weather report predicted a scorching 108-degree day. It is not quite fry an egg on the sidewalk hot, but close enough. I had explored the Vegas Strip briefly the previous evening, only to find that the dry heat was too much for my Dockers and polo shirt, especially with an undershirt. So I sought refuge in the cool interiors of a casino. Breakfast at the hotel had been decent, but the coffee was a lifesaver. I typically didn't bother with an in-room coffee, but sleep had eluded me, likely due to the jet lag and the nerves. Insomnia was becoming a familiar companion in my mid-50s. The night brought loud snores and the need for frequent trips to the bathroom, especially if I'd had a few beers in the evening. The hotel bed was as unforgiving as a rock, and the pillows offered little support, so I folded them to make do. My neck felt stiff, probably from contouring to find a comfortable position. I checked the bright digital red numbers on the 80s style GE clock, and they urged me to start the day. Reluctantly, I left the comfort of my room, making sure to close the sliding glass door softly instead of letting it slam shut like most of my nocturnal neighbors. They were likely still awake, indulging in a last beer or cigarette. My Enterprise rental car awaited me just outside the lobby door. I wasn't the only one who had a restless night. A few people were already up and about, probably having spent the night gambling. Adrenaline was a common sleep thief in this city of chance. As I observed some of the not so lucky faces, I couldn't help but ponder the nature of luck. Was it a product of karma? I wasn't entirely convinced. I'd known people who seemed to have everything handed to them while others struggled. Some argue that you create your own luck, while destiny, the evil sister of luck, might also shape each's perspective, compelling arguments. Homelessness was a stark reality in every city, even in Sin City. In front of my car stood a middle aged man a few years older than me, dressed in tattered jeans and a faded gray Who t shirt. I approached him and handed over a $5 bill, hoping that a little kindness could sway the tides of karma in my favor. He offered a forced smile and said, "Bless you, kind sir." With that act of goodwill behind me, I unlocked my rental car with a button and I was on my way. No key, just the fob with a push start button. A quick check in the rearview mirror confirmed that no unwelcome passengers were in the back seat. I certainly hoped that karma wasn't keeping tabs on that particular aspect. However, the face that stared back at me in the rearview mirror told a different story. Though not yet bald, the lines on my face had deepened and my hair had thinned and grayed. Before me stood a seasoned engineer who had spent the latter half of his career on the Gypsy Highway, a short-term defense-related jobs. The lifers who dedicated 3 decades to a single company had mostly faded away, some through retirement, but many through death. The Gypsy Highway was a term coined by a friend who described the succession of jobs, often defense related, which lasted 2 or 3 years before ending with the completion of a contract or project. Some ended with when larger ones absorbed smaller companies, and they often featured young managers with limited experience. Teams were smaller and individuals wore multiple hats. It was time to hit the road. I had already set my destination, a building adjacent to the McCarran Airport. Although it was just down the road, one way streets could throw a curveball, and engineers tended to err on the side of caution. My pre interview ritual involved mentally reviewing my past education, including training, my previous employment history, and reasons for leaving each job. I had been searching for a new opportunity for 3 months. Types tend to frown upon a 6 month employment gap. I even delved into the depths of my early summer jobs before graduation, surprised at how many practical lessons I had gained from them. These were typically physically demanding summer jobs in various factories. However, interviewers would likely focus on the last 10 years of my career, with the old days possibly coming up in specific contexts. The dot-com bubble burst and the defense buildup of the 80s ended, leading to frequent layoffs in many companies. That wasn't something we anticipated during the optimistic times when recruiters visited my high school and identified me as an engineering candidate. I recalled a recruiter's opening line at my high school. If you like math and science, engineering might be a career path for you. At that point, I was already admitted to the local university and expected to follow the well trodden path of my classmates. It led towards education and possibly coaching, given my love for sports. Looking back, I wondered how that path might have played out. My guidance counselor wasn't helpful, merely suggesting my SAT scores were good enough to pursue my interests. But at age 18, you're still finding your way. My inherent distasteful nature made the decision more complicated. Ultimately, my interest in science and math led me to switch to engineering. I hailed from when engineering students completed their degrees in 4 years and attended in-person classes. I opted for electrical engineering. While many friends from non-engineering fields partied through the night, I often worked alone in the computer labs at 2 a.m. Some of the coursework felt like magic, especially when diving into the mathematical derivations of Maxwell's equations, Schrodinger's equation, and quantum theory. I often wondered if anyone truly comprehended all the material. The professors seemed to. Nonetheless, I powered through the coursework and even managed to schedule an interview on my graduation day, which meant missing the ceremony. I received a job offer along with a couple others and embarked on my career in the defense industry. 15 years with the same company had seen me rise through the ranks and even into management as a team leader. However, layoffs had already become a recurring theme. My motivation to seek new opportunities stemmed from the fear of stagnation and the rapid technological changes I observed. I wasn't entirely sure if these changes were for the better, so I started exploring other options and interviewed for a position and eventually received an offer. Armed with this opportunity, I chose to voluntarily separate from my first company, motivated by a mix of factors, including the belief that I might soon be laid off anyway, and the lure of greener pastures. The next 15 years became a series of 2 or 3 year stints along what I've known as the Gypsy Highway. Companies continued to need engineers, but mostly until specific projects reached their conclusion. Specialization became even more pronounced, with companies seeking experience with particular software and design tools. Larger companies downsized their teams, leaving only one or two to continue to work. When this happened, engineers were let go in droves. In a nutshell, that's a summary of the last 15 years. As I navigated the streets, a GPS guided me, announcing right turn ahead, and soon after, you have reached your destination. My heart rate had already increased, my pulse quickened. I parked in the visitor space and took one last look in the mirror. At my age, you learn to accept certain things like eyebrows, nose hair, ear hair, and an occasional gray hair. The best you can hope for is to manage the most notable ones. My beard had turned particularly gray, and while some chose to dye it back to brown, I opted for a clean shaven look. Thankfully, my stylist would work wonders to conceal the thinning hair. After straightening my tie and ensuring the Windsor knot was near perfect, I reached for my briefcase. Reflecting on the past 30 years, I realized that life had its ups and downs. It meant being prepared to discuss both the good and the bad, though in this interview the focus would likely be on the positive aspects. Decisions had a way of leading to the next chapter in life. I remember one college professor who warned me about what to expect in an engineering career. He said, at family gatherings, everyone can talk about their jobs and people will understand, even care. For instance, teaching. Everyone knows the challenges teachers face at various levels, but it's different for engineers, unless there's another engineer in the room. It often required some skill to avoid getting lost in technical discussions with non engineers. Engineers shared a core education, but many were socially limited and capable of little more than tech talk. A typical engineer preferred coding and discussed Unix intricities over socializing and watching TV sitcoms. Working in the military industrial complex meant an even more enclosed world with non disclosure agreements and preventing discussions about classified projects with anyone outside the team. Navigating this interview would involve a delicate balance. Understanding the technical level of the interviewer was key. When they eventually ask about solving specific technical problems, I would need to be concise, saying software or hardware depending on the interviewer's level of technical knowledge. For less technical interviewers, I had to leave behind the tech talk and acronyms I used on the job. It was like a tightrope walk through a minefield. I especially when discussing classified projects. It felt like living in a different world. This interview could delve into that realm. The definition of technology has evolved, now encompassing cell phones, iPads, laptops, and various apps. However, as engineers, we have been dealing with the guts of these devices and bits and bytes, RF signals for decades. These devices had no real magic except perhaps in the popularity and social impact. We now live in a cyber age where cybersecurity issues and the availability of technical information threaten our identities, finances, and even our existence. We're we were vulnerable to solar flares and electromagnetic pulse attacks on the power grid, subjects often depicted in the movies these days. Terrorists and criminals were just a few clicks away, ready to plunge us into chaos at any minute. All these concerns could not be ignored. As I gathered my thoughts, I considered the technological landscape that had dramatically changed our future. The internet had exploded, altering the course of our lives forever. In this cyber age, the convenience and benefits were shadowed by security issues that could jeopardize our identities, finances, and even our existence. We were at the mercy of solar flares, looming threat of electromagnetic pulse attacks and power grid haunted our collective imagination. Terrorists and criminals were just a few clicks away, capable of plunging us into a new dark age. It was a reality we couldn't afford to ignore. Okay, well, I'm 18 minutes in, and I still have a ways to go in chapter 1. So I'm going to stop here. The actual interview is the next thing that takes place in the book, and a strange thing happens during this interview that probably you have never read or heard about before. But it turns out John Thomas is a very special individual. He has alien DNA, and the alien DNA allows him to see things that other people can't see, even in a photograph. So it gives him other abilities as well, ability to interface with alien technology. And from this point on, the book gets into a lot of the interview, and life takes a turn for an adventuresome role that happens to John. He turns from being a mild mannered grandpa into a hero, not just within his family, but in the whole for the whole world. So at that point, I'm going to stop, and I've got the data I need, and we will hopefully, I know my reading is not perfect, but it'll be better at next time.